So, have you guys ever heard this phrase? You can see right on the screen. Whatever you aim at is what you hit. Ever heard that one? Whatever you aim at is what you hit. So, which kind of makes sense. Like, if I am aiming at this wall, will I hit that wall? No, right? And I think here's the thing that we kind of get confused is we think because we confuse direction with intention. So I intend to pray. I intend to connect with God. I intend to be intimate with Him. I intend to be deeply connected with Him. I intend to love others. Intentions are great, right? I mean, they really are. Sometimes our greatest motivation happens because of intention. But the reality is, if my intention is there, but the direction of my life is here, as much as I want to hit the intention, it's not going to happen. So it's important for us to constantly examine our lives to begin to look at where is it that my life is going. And there was a famous motivational speaker. His name was Zig Ziglar. And he actually said this. You can see this right on the screen as well. He said, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. So it is. It's good. It's good, and it's vital for us to take moments to look at what is the direction my life is going in. What am I aiming at? Because sometimes existence just becomes the modus operandi of our lives, and so we're kind of not moving anywhere. We're just kind of stagnant. And the reality is, what we don't realize is, as we are stagnant, we're actually are moving. We just don't realize it. It's just a slow pace. And we're actually moving further and further away from the person that we desire to be as well. So as I look at this, today we're looking at how do we make sure that we are on the path of being able to pursue what God has designed us to pursue. And as we look at that, I think it's important for us also to realize that sometimes one of the greatest obstacles for us being able to do that is people, in our lives, people that we run across. And so there used to be this thing back in the 80s that we did. It was called the Four Spiritual Laws, which stood for God, Man, Christ, Response. And so the first one, I pulled that out, but then I kind of finagled with it a little bit. So here's the first one, is this. God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, and so does everyone else. God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, and so does everyone else. So the idea is, if I'm not moving in the direction that God desires for me to move, then everybody else will have a plan for me to go in a different direction. So we have to make a commitment that we try to figure that out. So the first spiritual law is God loves you, has a wonderful plan for your life. The second is all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, so we've chosen our own direction in life. The third one is Christ. Christ has died for us. He's risen again. And so as a result of that, we have an opportunity to choose God, which brings us to the fourth, which is response, that we can respond to Him and who He is and begin to pursue Him. So I figured I needed to finish that because many of you will be going for the rest of the sermon. What are the other three spiritual laws? So just wanted to let you know what those all are. But it's good for us to begin to recognize it. So why is this important? Again, we're doing this series called Dialed In. And in this series, we are looking at what are the things that causes us to be distracted from God and from the direction that He desires for us to have in our lives. So week one, I encouraged you to make a distraction assessment in your life, just to kind of track your days and just kind of look at what are the things that distract me from being able to accomplish and be able to do the things God has called me to do, but also distract me from being able to spend time with God and in my relationship with Him. And then last week, what we encourage you to do is to make a decision. And that decision would be that, Jesus, I'm going to eliminate the distractions in my life that hinder me from being able to pursue you and come to know you and grow in my relationship with you as well. But as you can see, today, we are looking at now how people can be a distraction. But before I get there, for many of you, I've said this, and you might remember this, but this series is based off of a book that I read called Undistracted. And it just gave me some really good ideas about my own life and maybe some ways that I can begin to encourage our church, encourage us as well. And in his book, he tells this story, which is really interesting. The story is he has a friend that plays guitar for Carrie Underwood. And so Carrie Underwood was going to be in his town for a concert. And so his friend invited him, hey, you want to come to the concert? And Bob was like, yeah, I'll go. And so he shows up at the auditorium or, wherever the concert is, the venue where the concert is, and he goes to will call and they hand him his ticket. So he got his ticket in hand, he's walking, and he goes straight to the nosebleed seats because, he just happened to be there. He's not expecting much. And so he gets up to the nosebleed seats, and the usher looks at his ticket and goes, "Oh, no, 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 you're down on the floor." So he's like, "Oh, okay." So he climbs down, gets to the front, goes down to the floor, shows his ticket to the usher there, and the usher goes, "Oh no, you are not just on the floor, you are in the mosh pit." So now, and he's looking at all these young people that are gonna be bouncing around in the mosh pit, and he's like, "Oh well, I'll just be the old guy in the mosh pit. I'll jump around with him too." So he heads over to the mosh pit and he hands the usher his ticket for the usher to see that he can go in there. And the usher looks at his ticket kind of strangely. So then he calls another usher over, and the other usher looks at the ticket, and the usher looks at him and smiles and says, "This is an all-access pass. You can go anywhere in the auditorium you want to except the front stage. You can go everywhere. You can go anywhere. You can even go backstage." So he says this in his book. He says, and you can see it's right on the screen, "Perhaps this is what God wants you to know as well. He has given you he's given you access to go anywhere with your life and the whole world to do it in. The only spot that's already taken is center stage because the only spot that's already taken is center stage where Jesus already has it covered." So as we look at this, God has made an all-access pass for us where we have the opportunity to be able to share his love, his mercy, his grace, his forgiveness. We have the opportunity to be able to share that with the world around us. It's an all-access pass. And so last series, we looked at what does it mean to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so I kind of want to revisit this today. So in Mark chapter 12, verse 30, it says, "And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and all your strength." Verse 31, "The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these." So people like to ask the question, what is the purpose of my life? How do I figure that out? And if anything, as we've said, I want to continue to remind us of, this is the purpose of our life. The purpose of our lives is to love God and to love others. Now, if you're given special gifts and talents that allow you to do that more, great. But even if you don't, every single person in this room, every one person watching the live stream, every single one of us are capable of being able to love God and love others. We're all capable of that. So with this in mind, I want to tell you your all-access pass. So here you go. You have an all-access pass to live a life of intimacy and impact. You have an all-access pass to live a life of intimacy with God and who he is, impact, that we're impacting others, and also seeing our own lives being impacted as we continue to pursue and honor and love him. So that's what we're looking at today. So the question becomes, well, then, Ken, how do we do that? Because, again, we're also talking about today how people can be a distraction to us, that hinders us from being able to pursue what God desires for us to do. How do people get in the way of being able to have intimacy with God or being able to impact their lives or influence their lives in positive ways? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a guy this week, another case study for us. And this is a guy who really was specifically called by God, had all the potential to be used by God, incredible calling upon his life. And just to kind of give you a background of what's happened to get us to the point where his story starts is in Israel, over the course of their history, they were known for being just like us. They make decisions, they go their own way, it blows up in their faces, they get conquered by other nations. And so what God would do is God would raise up what they would call a judge. And that judge would come along. It's not like, Judge Judy. It's not Judge Judy lead them in the battle, kind of thing, although she possibly could. But it's like this, it was kind of like a warrior, someone that would come along. And so God would use them incredibly. And so this kind of became a pattern. And so the very last judge was a guy named Samuel. And the people approached Samuel, because he's not only is he a judge, he's also a priest. And so they approached Samuel and they said, you know what, we look at the other nations that are around us and we want to be just like them. So we want a king, pick someone to be our king. And at first, Samuel is offended because God's desire up until that point was for Israel to be a theocracy. In other words, they're led by God, and then the world are able to see here's this nation that's led by a loving, caring God who also watches out for his people, who also challenges his people to be better, who also holds them accountable, but they're growing in their relationship with him. That's what he desired for it to be. And the people were like, nope, we want a king. We want a king. And so God says, Samuel, don't be offended by that. I'm not offended by it because I knew that this day was coming. And so he says, so I want you to go ahead and go out and pick a king. So he goes in the nation. He finds this guy named Saul. And Saul is the kind of guy that looked like a king. And so Samuel sees this guy, and he goes over to Saul, and God says, yes, that's the guy. And so Samuel says to Saul, like, hey, God's chosen you to lead his nation. It's like, wow, what a deal. So God's chosen you to lead his nation. And so Saul, initially he was like, wow, I don't know if I'm qualified for this. I don't know if I'm the guy for this. Matter of fact, on the day that he was supposed to be anointed as king, he was hiding. And so they had to go find him, and Samuel say, look, you're the guy. And so he's anointed as king that day, and thus starts his monarchy, or his life as king. So things are going along, but of course, we've said that today is about being distracted by people. So we can kind of we can kind of know where this is going to go. That somewhere along the lines of Saul is going to be distracted by people. But here's the thing that's really important for us to understand. There's a list, and I wanted to read this list to you because these were the expectations of the person who would be king. The expectations were he could not be obsessed with money or obsessed with the pursuit of money and riches. He could not be driven by the pursuit of women. He needed to write down and have a copy of God's laws on him on a regular basis, and he regularly needed to hear and apply God's word to his life. Those were the expectations. Not high. I mean, not impossible, right? And this is what I want us to know is, like Saul, every one of us in this room, we are chosen by God. We are chosen by God. Chosen to be in a relationship with him. Chosen for him to use our lives, to impact the lives of those that we are chosen by him. And so what are his expectations of us? Not be obsessed with pursuing the things of this world. Not be obsessed with pursuing the opposite sex. For us just to be committed to the pursuit of him, spending time in his word, allowing that to impact our lives, for us to grow and to develop in our relationship with him. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. And this is what God God desires for us to have in our lives as well. So he's kind of a reflection of us. Now, here's what happens is at this point in our story, Israel is about to go into war with a group called the Philistines. And so what they do is Saul goes to his army, and it says that he picks 3,000 special warriors. And that's the description, special warriors. And so I think about like 3,000 Navy SEAL, 3,000 Rambos, 3,000, these guys are like the top of the top, the cream of the cream. These are the ones. So then what happens is he keeps 2,000 and he has his son take 1,000. So his son takes that 1,000, goes into battle, and succeeds incredibly, just incredibly. And so as a result of that, the rest of the army is inspired. So they come down and they're like, we are ready. Let's get it on. We're ready to fight. We're ready to fight. So they come down, they're ready to fight. And then what happens is the Philistines are, they got beat down. So they're like, okay, we need to prepare for this. And so this brings us to this passage in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 5 and 6. It says, the Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots. So imagine you've just won this battle, you're getting ready to go fight, and now your 3,000 men is looking at 3,000 tanks. It's kind of like the equivalent of what it is. And then this is 6,000 charioteers. So not only have 3,000 guys driving the chariots, you have another 3,000 guys on the other side with swords ready to slice you down as the chariot goes by. And it says, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. So we're looking at a crazy amount of work. It says, they camped at Michmash, east of Bethaven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves, thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. So it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to fight now. I don't know. So they began to freak out as a result of what's going on. And here's the thing that's really interesting is that up until this point, throughout their history, there have been many battles where Israel were facing overwhelming, impossible odds. And battle after battle after battle after battle, God has shown up incredibly. At this moment, you know what they make the mistake of? And this is what happens with people who try to get us to do things for which we try to get their approval. Is what happens is people begin to look at the size of their problem rather than the size of our God. So they begin to buy into the pressure. They begin to buy into the wrestle. And so then what they do is they come to you and they kind of begin to put pressure on you. Help me in this way. I need your support in this way. And then if we struggle with focusing on trying to live for the approval of people, then we could find ourselves running from person to person to person, trying to put out fires in their lives. And all of a sudden, we're living for their acceptance. We're living for their approval. And they become the audience for whom we start to live with or live for. That's why, again, last week I encouraged you to make a decision. You can see that decision right on screen. And that is, Jesus, I will eliminate my distractions with your help. Focus on loving you and seek you with all that I have. Because what that will do, here's the thing, is when you have a missionless, purposeless, pointless life in that way, then what happens is it becomes easy for other people's mission to become your mission. But when you recognize who you are and how God is calling you to live, then you begin to have the tools to be able to recognize what is a part of the mission that God's calling you to and what is not a part of that. So it helps you to be able to be able to filter through that and everything as well. But again, going back to Saul's army, some of them are like, oh, I don't know. And then it says this in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 7. It says, some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were what? Trembling with fear. So remember, you have an all-access pass to live a life of what? Intimacy and impact. Intimacy and impact. So here was an opportunity for Saul to have impact. To be able to say, no. Let's focus and let's trust in God. But what happens is they got distracted. This week, we had an opportunity to hang out with my family, and they were talking about a major distraction that many kids are facing now. Distraction, I know Carrie's going to be familiar with it. I know Todd's going to be familiar with it. I know the youth in this room, as soon as I begin to say it, you are going to be familiar with it as well. And that is the combination of two numbers. And when you say one number, then the kids automatically say the other number. And those two numbers are 6, 7. That's it. And it's not just 6, 7. It's 6, 7. 6, 7. And so Heidi talked about it in the class. She says, in the classroom, I can say something like, and the answer is 6. And the kids will go, 6, 7. 6, 7. And so it becomes like this thing, like it's a major distraction. And I have to confess, I've kind of bought into it because in my Instagram story this week, there's one point where Baker Mayfield of my Buccaneers goes over and high fives Bucky Irvin of the Buccaneers, and Baker Mayfield's number is 6, and Bucky Irvin's number is 7. So in my Instagram, it was like 6'7", 6'7". But yeah, so there's this thing, six. So it becomes like this crazy distraction that pulls people away. Have you guys noticed? Yeah, 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 yeah. And you know, your kids are it's like all the time. Oh, 6'7". And you did sometimes you can say 4'5", and they will go 6'7". So it becomes this incredible distraction. And I think that this is what happened is the army of the Philistines became the 6'7" for the Israelites. They became completely distracted from God and who he is. And like I said, rather than focusing on who he is, they focused on what it is that is in front of them, the challenge it is that they were facing. And have you noticed this? Sometimes this irks me. Have you noticed, and have you had this experience where somebody feels a certain way and they think because they feel a certain way, you should feel that way? Man, I'm freaking out. Well, you should be freaking out too. Or, man, I'm angry. You should be angry too. Man, I'm disappointed. You should be disappointed too. Like, you should be feeling what it is that they feel. And I wonder, because in this passage, it says Saul, and then it says the men were trembling. So it doesn't give the impression that Saul was. It doesn't give that impression. It seems like he was okay, but his army was trembling. So this could have been an opportunity for him to be a person of impact and say, we serve a great God. He's brought it through victory time and time and time again. So suck it up, buttercup. I don't know where that came from. But let's fight this battle together. Let's do this thing. We can do this thing. But instead, here's what happens. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 8 and 9. Verse 8, Saul waited there for 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel instructed him earlier, but Samuel didn't come. So here's the deal: is when they were going to battle, the priest was supposed to come, bless the men, so they were reminded to trust in God, be confident in Him, and so Samuel was going to come do that, but he hadn't shown up yet. So it goes on. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away. So he demanded, bring me the burnt offerings and the peace offerings. And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Now, doesn't seem like that's a big deal. But here's the thing. Here's what happens. Is remember, Saul's role was king, correct? So Saul is king. Samuel is priest. Their roles were completely different. But what Saul does is Saul sees what's happening, and rather than, again, influencing his men, trust in God, let's be patient for God. Samuel's going to be here. Samuel is reliable. Let's trust in Samuel. Instead of doing that, what Saul does is Saul sees his men freaking out around him and decides to take matters into his own hands. And the result of that is he steps into a role that is not his. And that's what happens when we live our lives for the approval of people, is we step into roles that we're not designed to. We step into roles that don't bring us fulfillment. We step in roles that don't satisfy us, that don't fulfill us. We step in the roles that don't fit ultimately the way that God designed us. And so by stepping into this role, literally what Saul is communicating to his troops is, we need to take matters into our own hands. We need to take matters into our own hands. And not trust God, not be patient, not wait. Sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do. So the result of that is we can be the same way, where we step out of purpose and we step into doing what we feel like we have to do. And we live lives that are distracted from trust, distracted from patience, distracted from focusing on God and who He is and the way that He works. And that's what we see that Saul does in this. So then it goes on and says, Just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Now think about the timing. Just as Saul was finished, as soon as he was finished stepping out a role that wasn't designed for him, all of a sudden now Samuel shows up. Have you had that experience in your own life? Where you know what you're supposed to do and you try to stick to it for a while, and then you compromise. And the moment you compromise, the answer presents itself. Like, man, if I would have just waited another day, another hour, another minute, if I would have just waited. And it goes on to say, and Saul went out to welcome him, to meet and welcome him. So, hey, Saul, what's going on? How's it going? Hey, Samuel. But Samuel said, what is this you have done? So Samuel calls him out immediately. What is this that you have done? And Saul replied, and notice what he does. Saul said, I saw my men scattering. Is it his men? Is it his army? Whose men is it? God's. Whose army is it? God's. So in this way, we also see him not trusting God, but also stepping into God's role into the lives of these guys as well. I saw my men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive. So now it's their fault, and now, Samuel, it's your fault. And you didn't arrive when you said you would. And have you noticed that? Like, have you ever gotten into an argument with someone, and when they use that word you, people know how to, people know how to emphasize that. And I don't know when my voice broke when I did that. But it goes on, and it says, and the Philistines are at Michmash, ready for battle. So now it's the army's fault, it's Samuel's fault, and now it's the Philistines' fault. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal. And I haven't, but that's not his role. And I haven't asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled. To offer the burnt offering myself before you came. So, I mean, in essence, many people will look at what Saul did and think it's not really a big deal. And the action itself may not have been, but his declaration was. His declaration was, God, when I don't see you at work, I'm going to step into your role. God, when I don't see you at work, when I don't see your plan at work, I'm going to step in, I'm going to orchestrate my own plan. And so this is what happens when we live for the approval of others, is we begin to say, God, I know that you have a plan for my life, but I'm going to step out of that plan to begin to try to help others and in a way that I feel like I need to. Which then raises the question, but Ken, you said I have an all-access pass for what? Intimacy and what? Impact. So Ken, if I have an all-access pass for impact, then shouldn't I be someone that helps others? Like, shouldn't that be the description of my life? And I think we have to be careful, because sometimes it's very easy for us to justify our actions and kind of spiritualize them. I mean, how many times do we know of people who have used the Bible to justify their sin in their lives? So it's very easy, for us to do. So, but the question becomes then, well, how do I know? How do I know if I am following God and living a life of impact, or if I am living for the approval of others? And it really boils down to one question. Who am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? If I'm doing this for the approval and acceptance of the person that's with me, then I'm living for people's approval. If I'm doing this to honor God and who he is, then I am doing it for him. So we have to be, in asking this question, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. Who is the audience of my action? Am I doing this so that the audience of my action, so that person will go, thank you so much, you are so great, pat me on the back, show me love. But there's a danger in living for the approval of people. You know what the danger is? What do you guys think? What do you think? What is the danger of living for the approval of people? They may not approve of you. Good. Anyone else? What's the danger? Any other thoughts? They may not approve of you. It's never lasting. Good. Because have you noticed this? And here's the thing I found. People's approval will change on a dime. It really will. Or I have noticed also that people get amnesia. They get amnesia. So you've been there for them, you've loved them, you supported them, you've encouraged them, but let's say the moment you say no, you don't care about me. You don't care about me. And if we're honest, sometimes the people that we live to try to win their approval they typically take us for granted. They typically put themselves in situations where they need to be rescued, and then they rely on us to rescue them. So in essence, we kind of become God in their lives. We take on the role of God in their lives, in essence. So I'll tell you that sometimes the most loving thing that you can say to someone is no. Is no. If they're asking you to compromise your time with your family, no. If they're asking you in a situation where, because there are people who will ask for our help and constantly put us out, right? Constantly put us out. And then don't care about the sacrifice that you've made. Don't care about maybe the extra money that you had to spend, the extra time that you had to give, and maybe how you helping them with their project at work push you behind on your project at work. And so now you have to play catch up because you were helping them, but they don't care about that. And the next time they ask for your help and you say no, they don't remember that you did that. So we have to decide who we want to live for and whose approval that we really want to go after. The approval of one or the approval of all? Who is it? And so that's why it's important for us to make sure that we have the answer to that question. It goes on to say in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 13 and 14, how foolish, Samuel exclaimed. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. So because you stepped in the role of God and you deny God and who he is, that is the cost. That is the consequence. That is the consequence. Now, I want to let you know, because it's very easy to think that this means that God immediately took his kingdom away from him. And actually, that's not the case. According to biblical history, because this happened early in Saul's leadership. According to biblical history, he actually went on to lead Israel for 42 years. That's how long his monarchy lasted. For 42 years. So what did he lose? One word: legacy. And that's the thing. Again, and you can see this right on the screen, you have an all-access pass to live a life of intimacy and impact. And what happens is, when it comes to impact can be summed up in one word: legacy. Legacy. What kind of legacy am I leaving? It was really cute. Heidi was telling me this week, because they went through some transition at their school, and Heidi was telling me about one of her students that had approached her, and her student said to her, she said, Mrs. Ballard, you are the one teacher that led me to believe in myself. Legacy. That's legacy. And so it's important for us to begin to realize that when we live for people's approval, we actually sometimes compromise impact. We compromise the opportunity for growth. We compromise the opportunity for them to be able to learn how they need to rely on God and who He is. We compromise their opportunity to be able to express and live out faith. And ultimately, we compromise our ability to be able to live a life of legacy, to live a life of legacy. So, this is why it's important for us to take time to begin to look at our lives and just ask ourselves those two questions. Am I living a life of intimacy where I'm deeply connected with God and who He is? And am I living a life of impact? Am I living a life of impact? Am I truly making a difference in the lives of those that are around me, bringing me hope and bringing them hope and love and connecting them with God and who He is? So, again, here at Encounter, what we've done is we've made Mark 12, 30, and 31 the core value of our church. Love God with all that we have, love others, and love ourselves. We've made that the core value of our church. And again, I want to encourage you to do this. On the table in the back, you can grab it. It's called a daily check-in. And it's a sheet that you can use. And basically what it does is tracks every day. You can just write down, how did you show love to God that day? How did you show love to others that day? How do you show love to yourself that day? Now, some days you may do all three. Some days you may do 2 out of 3. Some days you may do 1 out of 3. Other days you may do 0 out of 3. And on those days you do 0 out of 3, this is not about beating yourself up. The only goal of this is just to put love on your radar. That I'm living a life of love. I'm living a life of impact. I'm just putting that on my radar. And this is just kind of a good way to help me to be able to track that. And, we serve a God of grace. And so in those moments where God, I went 0 for 3 today, but, God, you know that I love you and I want to continue to grow my relationship with you. And God's like, all right, well, I bless you with tomorrow. So let's make it happen tomorrow. Um, so it's vital that we continue to allow ourselves to kind of look at that. And here's the thing, too, is you won't know the distractions happens in your life until you decide what direction you're going to live in. And once you all, and it brings clarity to your life in that way as well. So when you start to love God, love others, and love yourself, you'll also be able to see what are the things that distract me from being able to do that as well. So here at Encounter, we say love up, love out, love in, and we finish every message looking at this. So how does this message help us to love up? So in love up, prioritize the audience of one over the audience of all. Prioritize God and who He is. And loving out, realize that the most loving thing that you can say sometimes is no. Is no. And when you do say no, don't let people make you feel guilty for saying no. It's just saying no. Sometimes you have to put your family first. Sometimes you have to put growth first. So there's nothing wrong with saying no. And then love in, pursue legacy and impact over fleeting approval. If you live for the approval of others, you will never be satisfied because you will never be fully approved. Never. So live for the approval of one, and it will set you free. Father, I thank you